What job do you have at Netflix?
I'm currently working as a director and or producer, depending on the project.
What's your day like?
Currently, we're developing a feature film, so it's very unsexy. Like I have a lot of people go, "Oh, you work in animation?" Because I'm currently in animation, working for Netflix Animation, and they go, "Oh, do you animate?" I'm like, "No, there's so many other jobs." So right now we're in story room. We're developing story, so it's every day talking about story, trying to break story, writing, trying to work out characters. So it's about 4 or 5 hours of those conversations. A lot of research, so looking at images for inspiration, other films for inspiration on story arcs and shapes and plot, talking to storyboard artists. You might pitch a scene or something and then a storyboard artist might actually storyboard it for you. So it's a combination of writing, writer's room, a little bit of writing, some visual development stuff, loads and loads of conversations, and a bunch of research every day.
And so you're spending like a good 4 hours or so with a group of writers?
Two. Right now
Two.
it's a
Okay.
couple, but a month ago we were in a room because we were, our process was, okay, we develop for a little while and we've got an outline or something, and we want to stress test some ideas, and then you bring a group of really smart people together that might have different styles of writing, and they kind of like poke holes at it and stuff. So there was a moment when it was about 4 or 5 other writers in the room, but the process we're doing now is with two writers that bring different things to the story that are super valuable to the story, and then me, and we're working that out. The producer will sometimes pop in and out and be like, how about that, how about this, and just kind of, we call it creative friction, right? Just kind of, again, poke holes, and all of it is in the bid to kind of elevate what you're doing, or to challenge some things that maybe you're not thinking about, and you just keep working like that until someone goes off and actually writes everything up, and then you do it all again.
That's interesting. So challenge it, meaning they, for continuity's sake, or the character would never do that?
So with animation specifically, the process is typically development, which is writing, and then sometimes you're storyboarding stuff out because it's such a visual medium, just like live action, I suppose. But you want to see how everything plays because ultimately it's going to get off the page and be something, right? So you'll storyboard everything out and edit everything together into moving storyboards, which we call animatics. Then when you're done with that, you see how the movie's playing. You get temporary voice actors on it, and you actually see how the movie's playing in storyboard format. And sometimes you can see, that scene's a bit slow, or the pacing, or the jokes aren't really landing. And that's where the poking holes comes in, right? You bring other people to see how they're reacting. You go back, you iterate, you tweak, whatever. Put it up again, you iterate, depending on how much time and budget you have. You do that as many times as needed. Then you launch into the next phase, which is typically the very expensive phase, which is actually building the characters and animating them, then post-production. So the moment we're in now is the early development phase, which gives you the time to work out story and get the best version of the story up before you bring all the expensive elements in it.
You were from Zimbabwe in Africa, and now you're working at Netflix in the United States. How did this happen?
Unexpectedly, unlike a lot of people I sort of met that work in entertainment, they're like, I want to work in America. I wanted to work in Africa. So I, at 16, kind of discovered, I was on the medicine track. A lot of Africans will tell you this. A lot of folks that are from immigrant families will tell you, everybody wants you to be an engineer or a doctor or a safe job, right? A guaranteed, needed job that will always be there forever, right? So doctors, engineers, that kind of thing, architects. And I was on the doctor track. Then I saw blood one time. I was like, that's not gonna work because I want to pass out. And I was always writing and did a play. Then a really smart teacher was like, I can see you kind of gravitating towards theater as a path to study, but you're gonna be broke for a minute because not everybody can be, what's that guy? Who's this big theater director, British, I forget, but not everybody can be that guy. So how about you do film and then hopefully you do okay and you can come back to theater. So I went to film school in Australia, and I deliberately went there because of Baz Luhrmann and Nicole Kidman. I was like, the level of craft, I was just so, Moulin Rouge, okay, just did it for me. I was just like, the level of artistry was phenomenal. So went and trained there Finished film school, but Australia was wildly competitive just to kind of get in because it's a very mature film industry, and I couldn't break in. And so I was making stuff independently, and I was like, wait a minute, I've always wanted to make African content. The whole reason I did film school was to tell our stories. And so I was like, okay, where in Africa is there a mature film industry that I can learn the most from? And South Africa, which is right next to Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe's at the tip of Africa, at the most southern part of Africa, and then South Africa's the tip underneath. We're bordering countries, and it had a really mature film industry. I think at the time it was like, I think now it's at least 100 years old. I think the first film cameras were even used in South Africa. So I was like, okay, that's where I'm gonna go. That's where I'm gonna learn. And for 15 years I was there. That's where I kind of grew my career. And I worked as an entertainment journalist. That's the first job I could get. So I was on that red carpet doing what you're doing and interviewing celebrities. And it was my way to learn the film industry very, very quickly because I was always on film sets, kind of behind the scenes and all that stuff. Didn't love it very much. I was like, I'm a serious filmmaker. I've got stories to tell. And so I kind of left that and then ended up working documentary and then scripted. And then I was sort of like, people would be like, you're really good at producing. You're really good at like, bringing things together and whatever. Maybe you should like, produce more. And then I I was like, okay, I need to understand how the business of film works. And then I did an MBA. And that was like, okay, cool. I can start to create jobs for myself instead of relying on other people to create jobs for me. So as I was doing the MBA, I was getting a little bit jaded by live action because at the time I was now working as a broadcast executive in South Africa, and I had a slate of 15 shows that I was in charge of, right? It was hardcore. It was terrestrial television, so that you watch a show at a particular time and it's weekly and there's advertising that you have to make sure that is excited about your show. And so it was just a combination of being creative and the business orientation, but the high pressure of delivery because I was looking after live shows and I just felt stressed all the time. And I was like, and this stuff doesn't live forever. Like you have a live show and it's done. I don't think you've moved people's hearts or whatever. And then I was thinking about my first love, which was animation. And I was like, I remember watching The Lion King and it stayed with me forever. How can I start making stuff like that? Because stuff like that lives forever. So thesis time with my MBA, I was like, you know what? How about I find a way to bring foreign investment into Africa so we can tell African stories, right? Because our stories, people watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is a super successful show on Nickelodeon. We've got Mickey Mouse and franchise after franchise. We've got Disneyland. These things that have been born out of animated projects. And I was like, Africa's so full of myths and really cool stuff and really cool stories. If we can bring big money and tell our stories, this could be super exciting. And so as I was doing my MBA, I'm interviewing all of these animation studios in Africa to see what are they doing? What are pathways to bring investment? And then I met the CEO of Triggerfish Animation Studios, which is the biggest animation company in South Africa, and interviewed them. And we really hit it off. And at the time, they were making a show for Netflix. It was the first African animated show. And I applied to be a writer on that show. And I think 700 applicants applied. And I got into the top 20, but I didn't get the job. I was devastated because I was ready to leave this broadcast job and come into animation. And I didn't get the job. But 6 months later, they're like, wait, we're trying to do this pitch to Disney. And you were asking all the right business questions. And you're also a creative. And you're also a producer. Do you want to pitch with us? And then if you get it, you can be a producer on the thing. And we got it. And so that was my break into animation. And in that, this is coming to the how did I end up in America? In trying to be as African as I am, that's how I wound up in America because I'm making an African animated series, right? And so it was Disney Europe, Middle East, Africa that was managing the project. But because they're connected to Disney Burbank, LA, they always had visibility into what we're doing. So I was always meeting these Disney American executives, as they were watching our stuff and giving feedback and so on. And then just, behind the scenes, Netflix is producing a movie that's set in Africa. And they were like, at the time, the movie had a female African girl as a lead. And they're like, we don't even have a female African person on the team. How does this even make any sense? And we're making an African movie. And so because of what I was doing at Disney, I was kind of visible. And they're like, we're looking for an African producer to consult on our movie. Is there anyone at Triggerfish who... And my colleague was like, well, Tendayi is African and she's produced. So I started consulting on the Netflix project, really super part-time. And then as I wrapped up my Disney project, they're like, oh, we love the work you're doing. Do you want to move to the US and do it more full-time? I was like, no, I love Africa. I don't want to disappear in the Hollywood system. My life's purpose is to tell African stories, and that's what I want to do. So my first answer was no. And then there was a new head of the studio who was like, that's really cute that you want to, tell African stories to the world and everything, but if you don't know how to tell African stories to the world at a global level, how are you going to do that? So how about you come and work at Netflix and learn how to do that? And then if you want to, down the line, you can go back home. And I was like, okay, that's compelling. So I moved here to work full-time on the film and just to be in this ecosystem of amazing, talented filmmakers and learn how to do it. And I think I'm starting to find my voice as a director and as a producer, and that is how I wound up here. Sorry, it's a very long story, but
no, yeah. I love the story. And that was 2 years ago?
That was 2 years ago, yeah.
What was day one like landing here and getting an apartment, or how was that?
I have to say, big studios like that are really good with, especially, when you're an above the line talent, they're very good at like trying to set you up, like they've got relocation people and whatever. So I was helped a lot, like in terms of, I had a soft landing, temporary housing and all of that jazz. Fortunately, because of the Disney gig I was doing, I was working with some US people. So I had US, America-based people. So I had a few people that were just so willing to be like, hey, I can apartment hunt with you. Hey, whatever. So I had like a handful of people that were just available. And then one or two of people I grew up with are actors that are Zimbabwean that have done really well for themselves. So I also had a couple of people that were helping me out. But it was overwhelming. Like I was a bit like, oh, America's fine, it's a melting pot, but it's not a multilingual country. South Africa has 11 official languages. I'm gonna be fine. They speak English, I speak. It's fine. Oh my gosh, the culture shock. Y'all are like... So I learned that language isn't just words. There's a way, like there, particularly in Los Angeles, I think because of the film industry, there's the face of what people are saying, then there's what people are saying. And so Africans are direct. We're like, I like you, come over for dinner, and I mean it. And if you don't come, I will be deeply offended, right? So that's how we are, right? Whereas here it's like, we should come over, we should have dinner sometime. It's so kind of vague. And so it was a big adjustment, like to kind of go, they're just these layers that are beneath what people are saying with their mouths, on the good and the bad side. So there was that culture shock because all you have is language, right? When you're in a new place, that's all you really have when you're trying to connect with people. On the positive side, the melting pot was incredible, just like so many cultures, and just being in an environment where everybody's exceptional in what they do. Like it's a highly concentrated city of talented, creative people. So you're pushed really to go beyond your level, and there's a high bar here. So it was very good to be around non-average filmmakers. And I'm not saying there were average filmmakers in South Africa, but it's just they're not as many. So it's a very competitive, very high bar. And then the business of filmmaking became very apparent. As we know, I kind of landed in the strike period. And so it just became evident that, oh, no, this is a business. So it's not just about the art. You have to think smart and longevity. And so it was a pull in multiple directions and lots of really cool things and then lots of personally challenging things and professionally challenging things. But I feel like I'm settling a little bit, but every day is its own thing. Yeah.